Hi there, everyone. So my name is Louise. I am from Enterprise Rent a Car, and today we have another one of our bite-sized webinars all around improving your presentation skills. So we often have to present as part of a university module, a job assessment centre, or again in the working world. So today's webinar is a really exciting opportunity for you to hear from myself and Shan, who I'll introduce in a moment, just to hear all about how to improve those all-important presentation skills. So in our webinars, we've already covered a range of different subjects, so everything from CV building to job applications, and even how to prepare for your first graduate job or internship. You can find all of these pre-recorded on our YouTube channel, which is Enterprise Rent a Car Jobs and Careers, if you do want to have a little look at them as well. So moving on, probably good to start with an introduction about us. So first things first, obviously my name is Louise. I am the Talent Acquisition Marketing Specialist for the North East of England for Enterprise. So I work with 17 universities across the North East, all the way from Sunderland down to Hull and Nottingham. And I'm going to take the time now to introduce Shan. So Shan, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Yeah, hi, thank you, Louise. So I'm Shan Williams, and I work as an employability partnerships advisor at Northumbria University, where I've worked for some time. And what I do is I help students to develop their employability skills, and I deliver careers education embedded within the curriculum. So I'm aligned to business and law, and also to architecture and built environments. That's my particular area. And obviously, as part of developing those all-important employability skills, I help students to develop their presentation skills, and also I deliver on modules where I assess presentation skills as well. So I'm well versed with the kind of what we're looking for in terms of presentations. So thanks, Louise.
Yeah, no worries, Shan. So yeah, Shan is going to be an excellent contribution to our webinar today. She's definitely going to be able to offer some really good hints and tips alongside the content that I have for you guys today. We do have the chat box, which Shan will be looking at throughout the webinar. So please do pop any questions in there that you do want to ask myself or Shan, and we will also take sort of 5-10 minutes, time dependent, at the end to go through any other questions. So let's jump right into it. So first things first, the most important thing with a presentation is being able to find that story behind the presentation. How many times have you been in a university lecture where the university lecturer has just been spouting out sort of facts and figures, and your brain is just completely scrambled and you're completely lost in translation? And on the flip side of that, how many presentations can you remember that you've watched when they've been fun and interactive and you feel like you've really took the message away from there? So obviously PowerPoints and presentations isn't always about telling a story, but you can tell a story even if it is academic content that you are presenting. And to do that, the most important thing really is to focus on characters. So everything has a story, even if it is facts and figures. And you need to ask yourself, who's directly involved in that, and how can I turn that into sort of a fun and interactive story to get my message across? So, for example, when I'm talking about Enterprise, what we do primarily is rent cars, but I'll focus on our employees, I'll focus on our customers, and I'll really bring the story out of that when I'm presenting about Enterprise, because it just gives it more of a personal touch, and people tend to remember things a little bit more if you do say it in that way. Shan, what's your sort of opinion on that? Do you think that's a sort of good way to go about things?
Definitely. I think to make it relatable, it is about kind of storytelling, and the kind of to make it the most engaging presentation possible and make it memorable and resonating with the audience. If you can build it and personalize and use that kind of storytelling technique, then you're off to a flying start.
Definitely. And it doesn't mean that you have to be a natural storyteller or a comedian by any means. It just means that you are displaying your message in a way that isn't just literally screaming out facts and figures at the people that are listening to you, because you won't get anything on that one. Right, so perfect. So moving on to the next slide. So again, this is sort of how you should split your time up when you're looking at creating that presentation. Quite often when people actually start their presentations, They actually work on building the slides first and then putting their content in around that. The best way to actually be able to do a really good presentation is to actually craft that story and build the content first. So that should be the first thing that you do when you're thinking about doing your presentation. What is it that you want to talk about? What message is it that you want to get across? And then from there, you can build the slides. So as you can see here, the first 33% of your time should be spent crafting that story. The second 33% should be building the slides and the content around that. And then finally, the last 33% should be practicing. In my opinion, and we will go on to this a little bit later in the webinar, but practicing is one of the main things to improve a presentation, just to make sure that you're really confident in delivery and what you're saying, and that you can see that everything flows together and it makes sense and it's cohesive. So yeah, start by actually crafting that story, then building the slides, and obviously practice. Would you say that you did it this way around, Shan, or would you say you're normally presentation first?
No, definitely. So you can build the content and the slide, actually putting the content onto the slides will be the last bit, without a doubt. Yeah.
Exactly. It's always more effective that way, and it means that you can really focus on crafting that story and getting that message across, and then build your content around that. Right, so just here I have a little example of two different slides, and we're going to analyze them a little bit. It's really important to make your slides visually attractive, and it really helps people to follow the sort of journey of your presentation as you go along. So if we start by taking a little look at the print screen on the left, so as you can see, it's very wordy. It's quite boring to look at. It does actually have the spell check squiggles on there. I'm not sure if that is actually meant to be there or not, but this slide, it really doesn't look attractive. And I just know that if I was sat in a university hall, or if I was sat watching this presentation, I would spend so much time reading the text as opposed to actually listening to the person delivering the presentation. And on the flip side, if we take a look at the screen on the right, it's fun, it's eye-catching, there's some really nice graphics on there, and it summarizes what actually needs to be said and lets the speaker talk around it, as opposed to having a ton of text on there. It's got little sort of sections that are easy for the listener to read and then be able to follow along with what the speaker is saying. This means that the audience actually then spends more time listening to the person speaking as opposed to reading the bulk text, as you can see with the example on the left. Now, it doesn't mean you have to be a graphic designer. I know that this sort of example is very, very well, it is presented very well visually. It doesn't mean that sort of in a sort of way to summarize it. It just means that just make your slides simple, fun, eye-catching, and easy to follow, and some little graphics on there do go a long way. What's your thoughts on those two slides, and if someone showed you them?
Yeah, no, definitely. This is really important. I think you mentioned simplicity now. I think that's really important as well, because you've got to make it memorable, and the key salient points have really got kind of stand out. So that's important. And I think imagery, the right balance of images is right as well, because a lot of people are visual learners as well. Yeah. And if it is just kind of text heavy, wordy, like the slide on the left there, it's just going to turn a lot of people off. So no, without a doubt, getting that balance is really important, and obviously showing your creative skills as well, can be beneficial too.
Exactly. And it might often be, I've sometimes watched presentations where what the speaker is actually saying is really engaging, and it's really good academic intellectual content, but it's hard to follow because you don't have that representation on the slide. So it can be really disappointing sometimes when someone really does have excellent content, but it's just too hard as a listener to follow. And we will move on to how to sort of get across your message in simple steps in the next sort of couple of slides. But it's really good to see the two examples here and how they compare, and sort of what a presenter should be coming across to their listeners. So moving on to this next slide. Now, this slide is super interesting. My colleague Graham actually let me know about this, and it absolutely blew my mind. So please let me know if anyone else has heard of this, because I certainly haven't. So PowerPoint actually have this new feature that basically gives you hints and tips on your presentation. So if you can see here on the little screenshots, when you finished your PowerPoint, if you go on the tab that says slideshow, and then rehearse with coach. Providing that you've got a computer or a phone that has a microphone and a camera, you can actually have yourself filmed presenting your PowerPoint, and then it gives you live feedback using artificial intelligence. So it's absolutely crazy, but it is very interesting, and it's nice to have that feedback before you actually go and present. I know that when I'm sort of preparing presentations, I'll get a family member or I'll get a friend to watch me. But if you're not confident doing that, this is a really exciting piece of kit to get that feedback in the comfort of your own room. So as you can see here on the rehearsal report, obviously the person's done their presentation, they've had it filmed, and PowerPoint has analysed it. And you can see it has tips and everything from your pace, your sort of sensitive phrases, if you use filler words, your cadence, sort of how monotone you are. So it really does give you an excellent opportunity to just monitor how that presentation's been before you do it. Shan, have you heard of this before? Is it just me?
Yes, it's fairly recent, but yes, I have heard of it, and we've started to. I use it now as well. Obviously, when I'm preparing content as well, and these sort of tools, the kind of AI-driven tools, are more common, and obviously a theme that are kind of driving recruitment and selection in particular. So we're drawing attention to them at the university and providing a lot of support in our kind of support that we do online as well. Because as you say, it's brilliant to get that kind of instant feedback and do it in a comfortable environment at home, actually.
Exactly.
And as you say, it gives you that kind of feedback on, like, monotone and how to kind of emphasize particular, meaning with your voice, and to get that message across, which is really, really important in presentations.
Perfect. And have you had much feedback from students on this? Have they used it and enjoyed it, or?
It's a fairly recent thing, so that we're starting to kind of mention quite readily now. But students are finding it really useful, particularly in kind of assess modules and things like that, particularly. So it's fairly recent, Louise, at the, for us. But we're kind of starting to utilize it more and more.
Oh, excellent. Well, there we go. There's a first-hand case study of it being used in university. So yeah, honestly, from what Shan's saying, it sounds like it's a really good piece of kit. So I would really recommend utilizing that, and even maybe watch a couple of tutorials on how to do it on YouTube. I'm sure there'll be stuff out there, but yeah, I'll move on to the next slide now. This is what we want to do. We want to keep it simple, silly. So KISS. They say that you should, to be able to understand something, you should be able to say it in 2 sentences or more. Again, sort of drawing on a previous example, I've listened to many presentations where, again, the content has been excellent, but it's been over-explained. And it really is hard to follow as a listener, even if what they are saying is actually of depth and really good knowledge, it can just be lost. So we want to keep it as simple as possible and explain that message in 2 sentences or more. And the same can be added to your presentations. So if you're explaining a point, explain it in a way that gets across your message and it just cuts out what I would call that extra waffle. So get rid of all of those filler words, all of that unnecessary sort of storytelling that doesn't need to be told, and keep it simple and keep it fun and engaging. Would you agree with that, Shan, or would you say that you would say it needed to be bulked out?
No, I would say exactly the same. It's simple is the way to go. You don't have to over explain it, just turns people off. So keep it simple. As long as you've got the kind of distill the salient points, that's all you need. Yeah,
definitely. Just really, what is your core message, and get that across, and cut out all that extra waffle. And as well with timing, the longer a presentation goes on, the more people's attention span tends to wane. If you've got a half-hour lecture as opposed to an hour's lecture, you probably learn a lot more in the half hour than you do in the hour, because your attention will wane towards the end of it. So yeah, keep it simple. What's your core message, and stick to the point. Now, again, the rule of 3. This isn't just for PowerPoint presentations or presentations in general. It is just for any sort of rule in terms of presenting. So the rule of 3 is the idea that a story that comes in 3s are more memorable to a listener. So for example, beginning, middle and end, or we could say stop, drop and roll, reduce, reuse, recycle. It's everything that has sort of headings in 3s are a lot more memorable according to research. And you can apply that to your presentations as well using these 3 points. So when you are preparing your presentation, number 1, takeaway. what are the main things that you want the audience to know, and remember to KISS. So the previous slide, keep it simple. Number 2 is instructions. This is the content. So once you have the main things that you want the audience to focus on, you build the content around that. And again, we want to make sure we explain it in 2 or more sentences, so keeping it simple. And then finally, going all the way back to that first slide, the narrative. So that's the story. So once you've got the content and you've really planned and prepared what it is that you want to say, how can you distribute that in a way that is fun, engaging, and interactive to the audience? And by keeping it to these 3 things, we would normally say that gets the best results when it comes to a presentation. And when you break it into 3, it helps to just give it that structure. So yeah, I don't know if you've got anything else to add to that one, Shan.
No, I mean, that's a nice model, and we use a similar one as well. And I think it is really important, because one of the things that, as well as when people are looking at your or judging your presentation, whether that's part of an interview or as part of a module or whatever you're doing, or in a kind of work setting, it's apart from kind of being able to kind of deliver it in a composed and comfortable way, it's also about how you're getting that message across, and how you approach it, and the logic and how you structure it. So I think it's a really good method for approaching it, actually. And so I'll take that one away for my use as well, Louise.
Yeah, perfect. I'm glad that you got something like that as well, Shan. That's great. Excellent. So moving on to the all-important eye contact and body language. So I've actually split this up into in-person and online eye contact and body language, because the 2 can be very different. But this is generally the main thing that your listeners and your audience will notice when you're doing a presentation. And if you don't do this correctly, it doesn't matter how good your content is, people will be so busy focusing on you as opposed to the actual content that you're saying. So if we split it into in-person presentations, we want to make sure that we're always standing. It sounds daft and it sounds really straightforward, but I have seen a lot of people actually stay seated when they're doing a presentation. It doesn't look good. It looks sort of lazy. It looks like you're not interested. So make sure you stand and you've got a good posture. But when you are standing, make sure you don't move around too much. Again, I've heard really confident speakers, but they're all over the room, and your eyes are constantly diverting to where they're walking as opposed to what they're actually saying. So stand still. If you use your hands because you're an animated talker like me, make sure it's not too big and too crazy. Keep it sort of low key, and also focus on the audience, not the screen. You don't want to be looking over at a monitor, or you don't want to be looking at the screen behind you. Focus on the audience. And again, with eye contact, if it is something that is naturally quite uncomfortable for you, you don't have to scan the audience. What I would normally do is focus on a focal point behind the audience, but to the audience it actually still looks as though you were looking at them. Do you have any tips for sort of in-person presentation skills there, Shan?
Well, I like, the one that you mentioned there, looking over. I think that's a really important one, actually. It just gives you that kind of that psychological advantage that you're not sort of staring somebody in the face. But I mean, body language icon is massively important, and particularly, in-person presentations, as you know, and there is that kind of tendency to kind of look at your slides, to be looking at prompt cards if you haven't got them on screen, things like that. And that's the worst thing you can do, because it's all attention on you. So you've got to be natural, or you've got to be authentic, true to yourself, but really try to remember to make eye contact, to look at your audience, and as you said, not to gesticulate too much, but at the same time show your enthusiasm and not be kind of a cardboard cutout as well. So be true to yourself and deliver it in an engaging way.
Obviously, if you're in person and you may be standing behind a lectern or something and you've got your notes, again, that's absolutely fine, but just make sure that I'll probably say that you're not staring down at your notes like this constantly. Make sure that you are reading and engaging with the audience as well. And if we move to sort of the online, so obviously coming out of the pandemic, there's still a lot of online and virtual presentations like this one that are going on at the moment. And again, it seems really, really simple, but just make sure your camera's on. I've listened to presentations before where people have turned their camera off and done the presentation with just a voice, and it's really distracting. And as well, if you're doing any form of like group work for university, even if you're not speaking, I would say probably keep your camera on, just because, again, it's a little bit distracting if people are coming off screen and on screen as people are talking. So camera on. And again, even though you are online, smiling and engage with the audience. So making sure that you're not looking down at your phone when you're not speaking, or you're looking around the room. Look into the camera, look in the screen, and engage with the speaker and the audience if you're not particularly speaking at that time. Maybe speak a little bit slower and enunciate a little bit better if you're online.
Yes.
Because I'm sure you've experienced, Shan, it's really hard sometimes with lag and delay.
It is, yes, and I know, and speaking slow is so important, because even if you consciously make an effort to kind of, moderate that, you'd be surprised at how, you do talk, you just naturally, speed up, and things like that when you're delivering presentations. You've got to really work at that, because it's really important. And actually, there's a kind of a 2-minute kind of rule, although it's a loose rule, around how much time you should spend on each kind of slide, to allow the kind of the audience to absorb it, engage with it, and reflect on what they've just seen before you move on. And I think that's really important. You don't have to stick to it rigidly, but it's important message that you need to engage and be comfortable with that sort of that pause, really, and not being too quick to move on.
Definitely. And that's an excellent one, giving the audience the opportunity to ask questions by pausing and letting them reflect on what it is that you're saying, as opposed to just rushing through your slides at 100 miles per hour. Give them time to sort of digest it at the end of every one. And again, it seems really simple for last one for online presentations, but just background distractions. It happens. We were literally talking about it just before this call. It can happen, pets, children. Try and make sure you're in an environment where you're not going to have too many distractions, not only for yourself, but for the listeners as well. And try and use sort of, if you're sitting in quite a bright or animated environment, use some of the backgrounds that are provided on Teams, or like myself, the blur. So people spend less time looking at your interior and your furniture, and they spend more time looking at you. I think is a really good point. Perfect. So, and then moving on finally, it is really important to remember that we all get nervous. It doesn't matter how many presentations. Shan, I'm sure you've done a million presentations and you're a little bit nervous before each one.
Yeah, absolutely. We're not all sort of natural presenters, and even if we're quite accomplished at it, we all get nervous. But that's perfectly normal, and actually probably quite good to be a little bit nervous, because it means you're taking it seriously.
Exactly.
But you've got to be able to, in a sense, we're human beings, so we've got to be ourselves as well. But it's about how you compose yourself, how staying calm, and actually sometimes being able to think on your feet. So if you do get questions, if things don't go to plan, don't panic. Actually, don't panic. If the IT doesn't work, don't panic. Do you know what I mean? These things happen. It's about how you kind of respond to that, how you get yourself back on there and carry on, really. Because we're human beings, so that is important.
Exactly, that's the thing, and exactly right, Shan. It's important to remember that things go wrong, and that's going to happen. And as well with questions, that's a good point. If you're asked a question, you're not expecting to know every single answer. If you can't come up with something on your feet, again, rather than waffling, it's probably better to say, oh, I don't actually know the answer to that one. Let me get in touch with someone after this presentation. What's your email address? And I'll send you it over. So don't put too much pressure on yourself to know all the answers. That you're absolutely entitled to be able to pause, take a breath, and then reflect on that question, definitely. My colleague Graham let me know that he manages to get his nerves sorted by blasting Tina Turner. So if anyone wants to blast some music before a presentation, that's his tip. For me personally, I'm just an over preparer. So I'll make sure that everything is rehearsed and recited to a T. Because for me personally, I feel like if I've practiced every single thing, nothing can go wrong. Shan, what would you say you would do to help your nerves?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, you know, I deliver a lot, as you say, Louise, and you know, and I like to, I have to practice, and I like to go over things repeatedly, even if I've done something many times. I'm always out looking to add value, tailor it, pitch it right to the audience, and make sure that it's going to resonate, really. But yeah, you know, I like to practice, so I know about the timing, that I can afford to build in time for the audience to ask questions, to engage, for things sometimes not to go to plan. So that's important as well. So practice is massively important. You're right. I mean, we all have our own different ways. I like to walk around the block with the dog before that gets it out of the system, and then to go. Yeah.
Get all your excess energy out so you can focus.
Yeah.
Oh, perfect. Well, that sort of brings us to the ends of our hints and tips. So just before we move and open the floor to some questions, here are the links to our socials at Enterprise. So obviously we do provide these webinars. We are known for mainly our graduate opportunities, whether that's internships, placements, or our graduate program when you come out of uni. So all of those opportunities can be found on careers.enterprise.co.uk. And as well as that, we provide a wealth of content, like I mentioned in the beginning, for helps and tips for people at university and coming out of university or finding a job. So here are our social media platforms where all of that content can be found, as well as being able to link yourself to some of our TA representatives like myself that are more than happy to chat you through any application process, or just there for some help and support. So now I'm just going to open up the floor to any questions. If anyone does have any questions about anything that we've covered today, that will be excellent to ask now.
Okay, so we've got a question. So how do presentation skills differ for when I'm at university and when I'll start my graduate job in the summer?
Yeah, that is an absolutely excellent question. I think presentation skills in general, sort of the things that we've touched on today, are transferable throughout any sort of presentation that you do, whether that's university, job search, or again, when you start your graduate job. It's really just important, I think, to tailor those skills to whatever it is that you're doing. If it's a university, it's maybe more sort of academic content, so making sure that it's not too wordy, making sure that, again, you keep it simple. And again, when you go on to the sort of the graduate jobs, making sure that you've done enough research into the company, making sure that's coming across in your presentation. Shan, I don't know if you've got anything that you would like to add on to that question.
I think definitely, you know, if you're approaching kind of if it's in relation to get, you know, selection for a graduate job, then obviously you've got to get across your enthusiasm and and haven't done your research. But for that to be kind of, again, I keep using this word authentic as well, but not, you know, try and kind of the ones that they've heard over and over again, that it's genuine, as that's important. And you're right, there's a difference between sometimes academic type of presentations, because they tend to be quite content heavy. And so on. So there's a balance, but you know, many of the techniques and tips and don'ts and do's that we've mentioned are relevant, irrespective of whether it's academic or whether it's within the workplace.
Yeah, 100%. And as well, just because something is sort of academic content doesn't mean that you can't let your personality shine through. Don't get lost in the facts and figures and almost sort of take on that boring persona, you know, make it fun, tell a story and be interactive.
And I think that's really important, to let your personality come through and to present it in a kind of conversational way as well, that will, you know, add interest and show you in a good light, and try to keep us composed as much as you can, and where you can, you know, you mentioned storytelling there, Louise, but also include sort of things that are going to be of interest to the audience, information facts that they might not have heard, really, so that it kind of hooks them into further conversations or asking you questions after the presentation, which is really important, and that's going to make you memorable.
Definitely. I think we probably have time for one more question before we wrap up. I'm aware of the time.
Right, so we've got one there. How can I get better at presenting while I'm a student? Okay, and then the second part of the question: how can I prepare my presentation skills when I get my first graduate job? So, I mean, I can probably take the first one. So
yeah.
How do you get better at presenting? Well, attending things like this is really important. Attending, getting support from people like myself when you're at university, employability skills and, in career service. Obviously, looking at feedback that you get from, as part of modules and things like that about your presentation style and so on. Taking on board, peer feedback as well. So you often present as part of groups. So taking on board that peer kind of feedback is really important. Using tools like, the kind of the AI tools now that can give you instant feedback. There's lots and lots of resources online, accessible that you can look at as well. So there's lots of different things that you can tap into, and then you can actually get help with a mock presentation from somebody like myself as well.
Yeah, excellent. There's most universities will offer those services, not even just with sort of your careers and employability advisors at uni, but just your lecturers as well. We'll probably be more than happy to chat you through any hints or tips for that. And in terms of the second part of the question, preparing presentation skills when you get the first graduate job. With graduate jobs, if we're talking about sort of the application process and if there's any sort of presenting involved for that, we would normally say sort of personality, interaction, and commitment are the three main things. So number one, you always want to get your personality across because that's what's important to an employer. You want to show your commitment to sort of your career plan or your sort of research into the company. And again, interaction. So making sure that you're asking questions, making sure that you seem interested. And even sort of if you're doing a presentation for a company, asking questions at the end of your presentation is also a great thing to do to further your knowledge. And then when you get your first graduate job, and if you're presenting for your role, again, I would just make sure that you are reaching out to a support network of your people that you work with, your colleagues, your managers, and just doing your research. So making sure that there really is substance behind what it is that you're saying, and you can prove that you have put a lot of commitment and research into whatever it is that you are presenting. Is there anything that you want to add to that second part, Shan? Or
just I suppose that with it's about presenting, if you like, verbally is obviously expressing your communication skills. So with any kind of effective communication delivery, you can tailor your message and your medium and your tone and your style according to the context. So there's going to be differences to what you're doing at university and what you're doing within the workplace. So within that you'll have to adapt and pitch it appropriately as well, and to the culture of the organization in which you're working, and actually the content too. So that's important as well. Before you approach any presentation, you'll be thinking about what's my audience, understand the audience and pitching it accordingly.
Exactly. That's a great point, understanding your audience and just tailoring what it is that you're saying and making sure, like you say, that it aligns with the culture and the values of the company, I think is the most important thing. Excellent. Well, I'm aware of time. We ran over slightly, but with some great questions there. And like I said, we do have our other social media platforms. So if anyone feels that they've not had the chance to ask something, please do connect with myself or Shan on LinkedIn. Be more than happy to answer any questions. But thank you so much for your time. And thank you, Shan, for joining me today as well. Really appreciate you coming along.
No problem. Thank you for the opportunity. And if anyone wants to, connect with me on LinkedIn, I'm more than happy for that. So it's you can look for Shan Williams, Employability Partnerships Advisor at Northumbria University. And good luck.
Excellent. I know. Good luck, everyone, and thank you very much.